Welcome to the CPM Customer Success Podcast, where we help Office of Finance leaders enable an exact solution to enhance their corporate performance without spending countless nights and weekends in the office. Hi, I'm your host, Andy Smetana from Nova Advisory. Nova Advisory is a 100% OneStream professional services diamond implementation partner. We help OneStream customers and prospective OneStream customers get the most out of their OneStream investments. For CPM Customer Success listeners, we now have a weekly email newsletter to keep you informed on the latest CPM Customer Success news. By subscribing today, we'll keep you informed on episode releases, including customer success stories, OneStream interviews, and capabilities to keep you up to date about OneStream's unified platform for finance. You can check that out now at Nova Advisory's website, novaadvisory.com/podcast, and subscribe to the CPM Customer Success Podcast newsletter today. Today's episode is about the future of FP&A. Specifically, what FP&A will look like in 2026, a year set to be defined by AI and automation. Whether you're a CFO, a head of FP&A, or a controller supporting the planning function, the expectations on finance have changed dramatically. Leaders don't just want reports, they want perspective. They don't just want variance explanations, they want options. And more than anything else, they want confidence. Confidence that the numbers behind their decisions are accurate, timely, and defensible. Over the last few years, volatility has exposed real cracks in traditional FP&A models. Annual plans go stale quickly. Forecast cycles take too long. And by the time insights reach leadership, the business has already moved on. So today we're going to talk about how FP&A has evolved, where it's going, and what finance leaders should be doing right now in order to prepare. So what does FP&A look like in 2026? Let's zoom out and talk about where FP&A is heading. In 2026, the role of FP&A is far less about assembling data and far more about interpreting, challenging, and contextualizing it. Automation continues to absorb transactional and mechanical work, things like data ingestion, consolidations, reconciliations, version control, and baseline forecasting. This shift is well documented across FP&A practitioner forums and finance leadership research. And it's consistent with what groups like the Controllers Council have highlighted in their 2026 outlook. But this isn't a threat to FP&A, it's an opportunity, because the real value of FP&A and the real value of finance has never been in producing numbers. It's in explaining what those numbers mean, why they're changing, what could happen next, and what leadership should be doing about it. In high-performing organizations, FP&A increasingly acts like an internal advisory function. They pressure test assumptions, they quantify trade-offs, they evaluate risk before it materializes, and they frame decisions in financial and operational terms. FP&A is moving from hindsight to foresight, but that shift doesn't just happen automatically. It requires changes in planning design, data governance, analytical maturity, and how finance engages with the business. So one of the biggest barriers to this evolution is how planning still works in many organizations today. Even strong FP&A teams spend an outsized proportion of their time gathering data from multiple sources, reconciling various versions of things like spreadsheets, and explaining why two numbers don't match. FP&A trends research consistently shows that this data friction is one of the largest obstacles preventing FP&A from operating strategically. Intelligent planning flips that equation. Instead of static, line item models, leading teams adopt driver-based planning. They're models that reflect how their business actually runs. When volumes change, the forecast updates. When pricing shifts, margins adjust. When assumptions move, downstream impacts are visible immediately. So here's a customer example. One FP&A team that Nova Advisory worked with needed nearly 2 weeks to refresh a forecast. By the time their leadership reviewed that forecast, Well, the assumptions had already changed, and as a result, the confidence in their numbers was very low. After redesigning the model around a small set of core operational drivers, forecast refreshes dropped to under 48 hours. That change didn't just improve efficiency, it changed FP&A's role in the room. They stopped reacting to questions and started shaping the conversation. This approach improves forecast relevance, it reduces manual rework, and it shortens decision cycles. It also enables continuous planning. Forecasts are no longer quarterly fire drills. They become living models that evolve as conditions change. This is a theme that's echoed across OneStream's guidance on what FP&A leaders must prioritize in order to drive value. So what should FP&A leaders be prioritizing now? What separates FP&A teams that are ready for 2026 from those that are struggling? Well, across industries, maturity levels, and company sizes, Nova Advisory sees these 5 priorities consistently paying off. The first is governance without bureaucracy. Governance doesn't mean slowing things down. It means clear definitions, clear ownership, clear accountability. FP&A leaders increasingly need governance that enables speed, not endless reconciliation. Strong teams align closely with IT and their data infrastructure, but they maintain finance ownership of their planning logic, their assumptions, and their business rules. And that balance is critical. So priority number 2 for FP&A leaders is scenario planning as a core capability. Scenario planning can't be something FP&A dusts off during crisis. Leading teams, they run their scenarios regularly, not because they expect all of them to happen, but it builds an organizational readiness. And at this point, scenario thinking is a foundational skill for modern FP&A. It's not an advanced capability. So when volatility hits, prepared teams aren't scrambling. They're ready. Priority 3, a single source of truth. Nothing undermines credibility faster than multiple versions of the truth. When actuals, forecasts, and scenarios live in disconnected tools, FP&A becomes a reconciliation function, not a decision partner. Unified planning environments eliminate this friction. They allow FP&A to answer questions faster, defend their assumptions, and focus on implications instead of inputs. Priority number 4, breaking down silos. Planning rarely fails because of math. It fails because of misalignment. Sales, operations, supply chain, and finance all see the business differently. But FP&A adds value by bringing those perspectives together into one coherent narrative. This is where FP&A evolves into a unifier and not just a reporter. Priority number 5, data you can defend. FP&A leaders are increasingly challenged by executives, boards, and investors on their assumptions. Being able to trace your inputs, explain your drivers, show your logic is critical to building trust. And trust is the currency that gives FP&A their influence. So let's now shift and talk about AI, because this is where expectations and uncertainty often collide. The conversation has moved past, well, should we implement AI or should we use it? The real questions now are how do we use it effectively and how do we prove it's actually working? According to OneStream's guidance on FP&A KPIs for proving AI ROI, high-performing teams focus on very practical outcomes. Forecast cycle time. Are forecasts faster and easier to update? Scenario velocity. Can FP&A respond to leadership in hours rather than weeks? And driver level accuracy. Are forecasts improving where it actually matters? Also adoption. Are business partners using the outputs or are they bypassing them? AI earns its place in FP&A when it reduces friction, it improves confidence, and it elevates conversations. So let's now turn to a CPM customer success story for this week. One pattern we often see at Nova Advisory are global organizations managing growth and complexity simultaneously. In one case, a company's regional teams each had their own models, they've had their own assumptions, they've had their own timelines. So forecast cycles became negotiations instead of decision-making exercises. By unifying their actuals, forecasts, and scenarios into a single planning environment, their FP&A changed the dynamic. Their leadership stopped debating the inputs and they started discussing actions. And that's the moment FP&A becomes truly strategic. So in closing, let's shift from insights to influence. As we look towards the rest of 2026, one thing is clear. The future of FP&A is not a single technology trend. It's a transformation of the function itself, driven by the need to connect data across the business, empower decision-making, anticipate risk, surface insights with clarity and impact. And the teams that win this decade will be those that integrate their technology with strategic judgment. They elevate their business partnering and they redefine what it means to lead with finance. The future of FP&A isn't about just replacing people with technology. It's about giving finance professionals the space to do what they do best. They critically challenge assumptions and ultimately guide the business forward. Thanks for joining us for this episode of CPM Customer Success. Reminder to check out the CPM Customer Success weekly email newsletter to stay informed of the latest CPM Customer Success episodes and OneStream news. You can check that out now at the Nova Advisory website, novaadvisory.com/podcast, and subscribe to the CPM Customer Success Podcast email newsletter today. Thanks again for listening, and I'll catch you next week for another episode of CPM Customer Success.